Welcome to Underwire Podcast. If you're new, I'm Dominique, and if you're returning, thank you. So today we are joined once again with my good friend Carmalene Churba, and if you did not catch her life story, please do. Please do. Not only is she amazing at what she's accomplished, and she will inspire you to just accomplish your dreams and set goals for yourself. I mean, amazing story of what she's been through in her childhood. But today's video is not appropriate for children, so please listen with your earbuds in. Today, we are talking about human trafficking. So basically what I told Carmalene I wanted to talk about when it came to this subject was the movie that's out right now, The Sound of Freedom. And I want to talk to Carmalene about what The Sound of Freedom missed. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because Carmalene has been an advocate, and she's had just an interest in trying to help make this world a better place through different avenues. But one of her, for lack of a better word, passions is researching and advocating and speaking on and trying to help make a difference in the human trafficking and modern day slavery world. So welcome back, Carmalene.
Hey.
So I would like to start with talking about what The Sound of Freedom missed. I know you took your daughters to see it. I took my older daughter to see it. Walking out of the theater, what was your first impression of the movie?
Sad, because it's really horrific. It was horrific what went on, but then it was also great that he was able to free these kids, right? But there's also still so many millions of kids still in slavery right now.
And that's what I want to talk to you about, because it's been about, 15 years that you've been researching this topic. And of course, you've been raising your children and changing careers. So I call you an advocate, and you had said to me, well, I haven't done as much as I'd like to do, which that's okay because we're busy women. Carmalene, I'm embarrassed to say, when you started educating me on this a few years ago, I had no clue. What is wrong with me? Like, I'm embarrassed. I had no clue. And then, and you'll attest to this, a few times along the way, we'd be having conversations about it, because we don't have typical conversations. We don't talk about purses and clothes. You and I talk about deep stuff because we both care a lot about things. But a few times I had to say, okay, please don't tell me anymore. I had to almost take it in bite-sized pieces, and you would tell me something, I'd go research it, and then maybe in a couple of months, I'd ask you a few more questions, and I'd go research it or watch a documentary. So what I want to encourage all listeners to do is please be informed, please be educated. However, take it in bite-sized pieces and take only what you can digest, because I think you'll get to the point that I'm at, where I'm finally at the point where I'm ready to jump in and help. But so I want you to tell me what you thought about The Sound of Freedom and what it missed from an advocate's eyes, from somebody that has for 15 years knows a lot more than that movie showed. Like, I know why they did it, right? They probably did it because what we just said. They wanted to give people a little digestible, like, introduction to it. But if people could have handled it, what would you have added to that movie? What do you wish people would know more of that movie didn't represent?
That this is happening in the United States. That Florida is the number 1 state for human trafficking. Texas is number 2. These are American kids also that are being trafficked. I mean, yes, this is happening in other countries, but this is also happening in our backyards. And I mean, right now we have over 40 million people living in slavery, right? And that's not all of it is sexual slavery. But there are people living more time than any other time in history. And also, I don't feel that our government does enough to protect these children. And we have a major crisis going on at our border. And these children are being trafficked from our borders.
Could you walk a listener through just very briefly, like what that process looks like?
Well, sometimes the cartels just take kids.
Okay.
Kids are like, that was those videos that they showed, like those were real time of kids getting snatched. So that happens.
At the end of the movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that happens. But also, these cartels, these people, they go into these poor communities where people don't have any money and, they're starving. They can barely feed their family. And they go in there and they tell the parents, oh, listen, we have these wonderful jobs. We're going to take them, into the city and we're going to employ them. And the parents believe them. And then they take their children and they traffic them, either sexual trafficking or working in the fishing industry. And these parents, they don't know anybody, or it could even be a family member. There was, I volunteer with International Justice Mission. We're the largest anti-human trafficking organization in the world. And, some of the cases, it's an actual family member.
Wait, okay. So explain that to me.
Where an uncle or a family member will go to the family and say, hey, can I take your son? We're going to make some money. I have a job for him. And then before the kid knows it, he's on a fishing boat. He's fishing 7 days a week.
Do you know what and I hate to talk like this about human beings, especially children, but do you know what the going rate is for a child in that predicament? Like, what would that uncle make off of that child, or is it different depending on what
it just
part of the country the world?
The world. It depends on the world and what the job is.
Okay.
But like they said in the movie, the sexual trafficking, it's a growing industry because you sell a drug once, you could sell a child 5 times a day, 7 days a week for 10 years or longer.
That was so heartbreaking.
So
do you think they should have added more statistics in the movie, like more education, or do you think it would have made it too much like a documentary?
I go back and forth with that because, like, how do you eat an elephant, right? You eat it one bite at a time.
Yeah, that's true.
And because of my research and, I'm a little bit more desensitized to it than other people. And I think sometimes when people are hearing this they have no clue in the world that this even exists. The movie probably traumatized them a little bit.
True.
Right?
True.
I just wish that they would have put a little bit more statistics in there and talked about not only are kids trafficked like that and abused that way, but also there's another type of abuse. It's called OSEC. It's online sexual exploitation of children.
What's the acronym?
OSEC.
So it's OSEC.
EC.
And it's online what?
Sexual exploitation of children.
Okay. And what is that?
So how this works is, I'm going to give the Philippines as an example because there's some cases that IJM has freed some children.
And IJM is what she just spoke about for everybody listening, International Justice Mission. And if anybody wants to further their education, the reason why you always see me writing stuff down is because then when I edit the video, I'm going to put the links under the video. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So first of all, IJM is an amazing organization. They not only, and it's made up of a lot of attorneys, right? And so we go into a community, we work with social workers, we train social workers, we train local authorities, we help the government, and not only does IJM go in and build the case, rescue the children, they also see it through in court, and then they do full restoration of the child. So
and that last part's so important.
Yeah, so it's full circle. So not only are they, and then the people that we employ in the countries that we're involved in, we use local people.
Oh, perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because we're made up of a lot of attorneys, we're trying to change laws and we're trying to change processes in other countries.
What a great organization.
Yes. And if they can't find a foster family or a family member that wasn't complicit with the crime, then we have partners where kids will grow up in the safe home, and then they'll also pay for their college. So and a lot of these kids, these people that have been freed by IJM, they come back and work at IJM, which is amazing.
Is Tim, I forget his last name,
Ballard,
is he involved with IJM?
No, he did something separate on his own.
Because when I saw him in another podcast, I followed him for a couple of years now because you started educating me on all of this. And I saw him in another podcast, and what he does sounds very similar to what IJM does, because he said when he started rescuing children, they didn't have an avenue in which to get them help, and they added that. I don't know at what point, but they added that, and he said, we're so happy because we were rescuing them, but then they weren't getting the mental health help that they needed, and they didn't have a safe place to go. So now they also do that at the end.
The full restoration.
Yes, right.
And there's a lot of amazing groups out there that do similar to what IJM is doing. There's also a group in Austin. I live in Austin, Texas, and there's a group there. They're called The Refuge, and they do the same thing.
Okay.
And also it takes a special type of foster parent. It takes because when you have abuse like that, you can't just go into a normal foster care. You have to work with people that deal with that type of abuse, because a lot of these girls come out of there, they cut, they have emotional, it's you need the right kind of people. You can't just put them anywhere.
That's what my mom brain went there when you said that. I'm like, wow, you're going to have to take a special person to bring that in.
Right.
And maybe even, hopefully they'll have some sort of, not that all of them will have training, but maybe they were a counselor, a therapist, or a teacher, or some sort of background because that's a huge responsibility, but God bless the people that do that. You know? Oh, gosh.
But there's more animal shelters in the state of Texas than there are places for these kids to go.
Okay, that speaks volumes. Why? Can we go back to one statistic that you said? Why do you think that Florida and Texas are they get the most children
Arizona,
from, right?
Yeah. For example, in Texas, approximately 80,000 kids per year are trafficked in the state of Texas. Like the Super Bowl is one of the biggest events that traffics the most children.
The Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Why?
For parties.
How? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, that's sickening.
So with the online sexual exploitation of children, one of the cases was a mother that anybody with a video camera can sell their children online. And so how OSEC works is, he's in his basement, he logs on to the dark web, he finds what he's looking for, he gets in touch with a woman in the Philippines, tells her the ages of the children that he wants to see abused and what the abuse that he wants to see. She goes out and she either uses her own children or she finds children that age. She sets up a camera. In this case, 2 children that we freed, it was a little boy and his sister.
Oh my gosh, just like the movie.
Under the age of 8 years old.
Oh.
The sister was much, much younger. And he had to abuse his sister on camera. And whoever's online, they order the abuse. They get to see the abuse live on the computer. And then they Western Union her $50. And she goes and finds somebody else. And during COVID, that type of abuse grew exponentially because people were home.
Okay, I'm going to pause for a minute. Were you just using Western Union as an example, or really that's what they use? Because you know where my brain went? What online payment platform is not catching this? That Stripe or whatever.
They don't know why they're paying her, or it could be it just. But a lot of times, in that case,
but I wonder if
she
there's
would
a way
go down
for
to
these...
Western Union, and he would, people would send her money for this type of abuse.
I just wonder if there's a way that these payment platforms could somehow red flag these. I don't know what they'd look for. I would imagine there would be some sort of set of criteria that they could say, let's put a red flag on this and look into it. But anyway, that's just a side note. That the fact that the internet is so great for so many things, look what we're doing. But the internet is like any other modality in life. And I will say it. It's like, I always compare it to guns. Because guns don't kill people. People kill people. And you can come at me with all the hate you want. It's what I believe. And this is the same with the internet. It can be used for good and it can be used for evil. And I'm not even going to get into how somebody sitting in their basement would even know about the dark web. I wouldn't even know the first thing about where... I know I'm so naive when it comes to this stuff, but where even to look. But anyway, that's another story.
But when you're a pedophile and you're doing illegal activity like that, or it's very easy to get into these chat rooms and these groups with other people that are just as sick as you.
Okay.
And they can show you how to do that. But there is a whole other dark web that has this type of abuse where you can buy drugs. I mean...
And our government wants to control every aspect of our life. Why can't they go on there and somehow figure out these... That's a rhetorical question, Carmalene.
I know.
Don't
Good
answer
question.
it. I don't know. Thinking aloud.
Why do they make it easier for criminals?
I'm thinking aloud why they couldn't go on there and catch these websites. Anyway, getting back to what the Sound of Freedom missed. So you bring up a good point. They kind of missed the whole online sexual exploitation. And I think it's because it made it easily to watch as a storyline if we saw them go to another country and it was war-torn and it was poverty-stricken, and also maybe to keep the bullseye off of themselves, let's not go into suburbia America and depict that. But it happens.
Yes. I think he probably just wanted to tell his story, because that is
his story. Yes.
Story.
Right.
That did happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just wanted to tell his story.
Right. And it was
already a long movie. It was like 2 hours.
And I'm glad he got it out there. But so I want to go back to when you started introducing me to this. I'll never forget. I don't know. It was probably a few years ago, 5 years ago or something. But I'll never forget. You were like, I don't even know how we were talking about it, but you said, well, yeah, like the milk carton. We started talking about the milk cartons and missing kids.
Yes. So, I mean, as a stay-at-home mom, when my kids were napping, or, if I didn't like watch TV and things, or, I would research things on the internet, and I started to, because I'm home, I'm with my kids, and I'm seeing what's on the television, and I just thought, like, wow, there's a lot of like weird, satanic kind of symbolism in certain things.
Don't be sorry.
And it kind of piqued my interest, so I started looking into some of that, and then I don't know, I came across this woman's blog, and her name is Noreen Ghosh, and her son Johnny was one of the first kids. He was actually the first kid, and we're dating ourselves here.
I know.
Because he was the first kid to show up on a milk carton. Okay. And he was a paper boy in Des Moines, Nebraska. And he was kidnapped in the morning when he was going out for his paper route.
I was in the 70s, wasn't it?
It was in the early 80s.
Oh, early 80s.
Yes.
I thought it was in the 70s. Okay.
And this woman's story is incredible. Like, I don't know if some of the videos are still on YouTube. A lot of things have been taken off the internet, but she has a really incredible story of what happened to her son and the research that she did. And this woman never gave up. And it's because of her that when a child goes missing, the police will get involved within 24. Usually they would have to wait to get involved if it was a runaway or something, but now they get involved much sooner. So she actually helped write legislation and was an advocate. During her research, though, she had come to find that her son was kidnapped by a child trafficking ring.
And what was the name of the documentary that you had me watch? Do you remember? If not, it's fine.
She finally recently they did a documentary, and it's very vanilla.
Okay.
But they did do a documentary recently. It was like Why Johnny Can't Come Home.
I think that might have been the one.
Yes,
I
and so it
watched.
kind of touches on what happened, not in depth.
Can I just interrupt you to tell you what the saddest part of that documentary was for me? When if you don't know, listeners, they threaten the kids.
Yes.
When they're in there. And then when you're in there a long time, they brainwash you. And so we can't sit from our perspective and say, well, why didn't they do this? And why didn't they do that? First of all, your brain isn't even done being formed till you're about 23 is what psychologists say, like the frontal lobe. And that's where your reasoning skills are and your logic. So you picture these kids that don't even have skills to reason and be logical yet. And then they're brainwashed on top of that. And you can understand why they just think that, okay, this is my life now. And so the saddest part of that documentary is when he got older and he snuck back home, because they also threaten, if you escape or you tell on us, I'm going to go kill your parents. I'm going to go kill your siblings or whatever they threaten them with. And do you remember that part of the documentary where he snuck back home and saw her as an adult? They had a visit.
Yes.
And this is what the sad part. You ready? He was so brainwashed and he was still so scared. He left and went back. Didn't he? Am I getting that right?
Well, he was a male prostitute.
Because he only knew that life
only knew
now.
that kind of life.
And she didn't understand,
right.
like...
But he also, I think, too, you feel so shameful and so dirty, and you don't ever think you could be a normal person anymore.
I know. Which goes back to what we were talking
yes.
about. The last leg of that journey to rehabilitate them and get them help is so important. Because, yeah, it's like, you go through hell to rescue them, but these organizations, but then it's like, okay, now what? They're so traumatized. I can't even imagine. And that one scene in The Sound of Freedom when the little girl was on the bed and that big monster was, we have daughters. I can't stomach it. What is there? It's just evil. It's pure evil.
Evil. And they did a really good job with that.
Yes, they did.
Being too explicit, because also you have to be careful when you're with that kind of content, because then pedophiles and people that get off on this kind of stuff,
yes,
they want to hear what the victims say. Like, they get off on that. So they had to be really, which I appreciated in the movie, that they couldn't be too explicit, which you can't get too explicit. We're talking about children. But they had to be very careful in how they did those scenes so that they weren't bringing a bad element to watch the movie, so that they could see something like disgusting.
And also the child actors. Can
Yes.
you imagine what they were coaching them before
Yes.
the scene? This isn't real. You know, you're just, like, I can't even imagine what they had to coach those kids through. But everybody did a phenomenal job in the movie. So we do feel as though, and we understand why they were missing some elements, but I wanted to bring you on because you have so much background in this. Like, if we could have gone further in the movie, or like maybe there's a step 2 now that all the soccer moms listening have like their first digestible piece. And if they're like me, they're going to give it a couple of months and go, okay, I can't take it. I don't want to hear it. I want to live in my bubble, because that's what I said, because it's too scary. But in a couple of months, I guarantee it, you're going to want to know more. You're going to be like, okay, now I'm ready to try to help, or now I'm ready to learn more. And so are there any documentaries or books even that you could recommend that somebody rent or purchase that could maybe help them learn more about just human trafficking in general, but more specifically the child sex trafficking?
I would think looking up a group like International Justice Mission, or how about in your own state? Like, do you have a place like the Refuge in Austin? There's also Red Oak Hope. There's organizations.
What's the one that you just said?
Red Oak Hope. That's another one, a group that I know of in Austin. Like, look at your local communities and see, are there places like this for these kids to go? Because when they rescue these children, they don't have anywhere to put them. There's no intake to take them. Sometimes they even have to arrest the child because they don't have anywhere to put them.
Oh, really?
There's not enough beds to take these kids. So every state should have 20 or 30 of the refuges.
Yeah.
So, and that's how these things get started, is because of everyday people like you and me that want to make a difference.
Grassroots.
That start raising money, that God puts it on their heart, and they open more places like this for the kids to go.
Can we get back to something I just realized we didn't finish? So, coming across the border, what's that look like when, like, I know there's several different ways, right? Sometimes the parents are the ones bringing them with the evil intention to sell them. Is that true? Probably doesn't happen as much, but
well, at the border, what the past administration was doing was separating the children from the adults, which has been happening for a long time there.
It was happening way before the last administration.
And the cages and the things like that, those were actually been in place for a long time.
Yes, I have.
But you want to separate the adults from the children, because you want to make sure that whoever is bringing that child across the border is actually their parent, or someone that has custody of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they would do is they would separate, and as soon as they would verify that this is legitimately a family member or the parent of this child, they would bring them back together again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when they would separate them, a lot of times that adult never came back, never showed up, because that person had ill intent.
Right.
And they have different wristbands that kids wear at the border. Different people wear different wristbands, and some of those are because you're going to be trafficked. Some of those are because you're going to be selling drugs. You're going to be working for the cartels.
Who puts the wristbands on the children?
The cartels.
Okay.
You can see the wristbands, all these different colored wristbands all over
They're
the border.
like cattle.
Yeah.
They're like,
well, yeah, because
oh my
you
gosh,
can sell them over and over again.
Oh my gosh.
And nobody is advocating for them. These are poorer, especially in poor communities, and
like we saw in the movie.
Like if my daughter goes missing, we would be on the news. We would have our attorneys. We would try every resource possible to find our kid.
Mm-hmm.
But these are poor people. They don't have any resources.
They're coming from countries like we saw in the movie.
Yeah.
Very,
from
very
the Philippines.
Poverty-stricken, war-torn. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the kids are either being kidnapped in their home country and being trafficked across the border by the cartel, or now tell me if this is true. I think I've heard of kids even coming themselves. Like they will just, I don't know how they get there, but they have kids coming across the border that aren't attached to any adult, but they'll have a phone number in their pocket.
I don't know a lot about that,
okay.
But and then they found, I think it was like 2 years ago, they found like 5 little kids that all, I think they were under the age of 5. Like one was barely 2 years old. They found, like, ranchers found them on the border, found them on their ranch, like close to the border. These kids were just dumped there. You don't hear about this in the news.
No.
There's people that I know that have families with ranches on the borders and in Texas, and they can't even have their family live on the ranch anymore because it's so dangerous.
Oh my gosh.
Because you have people just, it's like a free-for-all coming across the border.
Yeah.
But nobody's really keeping track of these children that are coming across the border that are undocumented.
And I mean, I'm not going to.
And the foster, there's not enough. There's not enough foster parents to take all these kids.
No.
Like there's too many kids that are coming across, and they don't have enough people to take them in.
And so, what happens to them? Do you know where they go? I don't even know where they go.
No, I mean, I haven't done enough research on that part of it, but
well, that's what a lot of the traffickers want too. But, and I'm not going to get political, but, listen, rules are in place for a reason. And if you are trying to extend your peaceful nature and your spirituality to people in other countries looking for refuge, okay. However, the cartel knows that, and the child sex traffickers know that, and they're going to take advantage of America's kindness, and they're going to flood our borders with this, and it's what's happening. But the statistic that they did show at the end of the movie, when the actor Jim, he was speaking for a few minutes, and he just said it right out. I never thought he would, but he said America is the number one consumer.
Yes, so they're a little over a third of the consumer of child abuse and trafficking. More
That's
than
disgusting.
A third. Mm-hmm. We're the biggest consumers. And I this is my own opinion, but what happens typically is because of the internet and all of the sex that's on the internet, right? So pornography is considered entertainment. Mm-hmm. And when you become addicted to pornography, eventually normal sex isn't going to turn you on anymore.
Right.
And then now you're into, maybe homosexuality. That's not turning you on anymore. And then it's maybe something worse like bestiality, right? And then that doesn't turn you on. So then now it's children. Ugh. And you also, a lot of these pedophiles, I don't know the exact statistic. A lot of them had been sexually abused as children.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And because of all of the pornography and everything that is available at your fingertips at any point in time, your kid can pick up a smartphone and watch explicit pornography. Never before in our history. I mean, before when I was a kid, maybe there might have been some Playboys at the grocery store, but they have those covered up. Right now, you turn on your television and it's basically soft porn on TV, and it's really desensitizing us and over-sexualizing kids. And they're trying to make these things more mainstream. And instead of calling somebody a pedophile, they now call them child attracted. And it's downplaying it, and they still call it child pornography. But it's not child pornography. It's abuse. It's child abuse.
Absolutely.
Because pornography is entertainment to some people.
Even though the adult pornography is seemingly, I should have said, consensual. If you're consuming pornography, I want you to hear me say this very loudly because this is a pet peeve of mine. Those women especially are so traumatized and damaged from either sexual abuse in their life, or they have been sex trafficked, or a lot of people don't know this. And I won't say who, but I recently saw an interview with a lady that used to be a porn star, and she's out of the industry and found Jesus, but she was being kept drugged constantly. Mm-hmm. They're drugged, and even if it's an adult female, I don't care what you say, it's freaking abuse. And I lose all respect for anybody, male or female, but let's be honest, it's mainly men that's consuming that, and then they wonder why I don't have a great sex life in my marriage. I think I'll go back and put a disclaimer on this, by the way. I didn't say that, like, kids probably shouldn't be listening to this, but or like you said, I don't want to have sex with my wife anymore because normal sex doesn't do it anymore, Right,
they need more and more and more.
Yes.
And then it becomes
them
ordering online sex in the Philippines.
So I'm not going to get off on a porn tangent. However, it does what we're just trying to show, and all the listeners, is the stepping stones. Is the stepping stones of how one thing leads to the next. And not bringing God into it again, but I am. Your journey with the Lord can help you with that. And it's not to feel shameful about at all. I think as humans, we all sin, of course. We all fall. But the key, and what one of the purposes of this podcast for me is to get you to recognize unhealthy behaviors and hear inspirational stories of people that have gotten over things. And maybe someday I'll have somebody brave enough to come on that has overcome a porn addiction, because it's very real and it takes you over. And the men I've heard that have gotten over it have truly, truly given their life to the Lord. And they all say it's the only way they got out of it. Okay. So that's a side note. and we don't want it leading to more awful things like child pornography, which is it's child abuse. But why don't you talk to us a little bit about the advocacy you've done or certain events that you've spoken at and how you got into doing that? Because I think it goes back to the International Justice Mission being introduced to you at your church, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I'd gone down that rabbit hole of the Johnny Gosch story, and there's actually a book. It's called The Franklin Scandal, and Senator John DeCamp wrote this book, and it was about kids that were trafficked from Boys Town, Nebraska, and they were trafficked all over the United States, but mostly to Washington, D.C., and these kids all had the same story. They could tell you what a 5-star hotel looked like in Washington, D.C. There were a lot of people implicated in this case that have committed suicide. One of them was Craig Spencer. He was a big-time lobbyist in D.C., and he was blackmailing people. He would have parties after the parties, and they would use the children. And that led me down this whole rabbit hole, right, and there were times I had to put it away. I couldn't think about it anymore, and
we don't want it consuming you.
No,
we're just trying to educate.
Because it's horrific, right?
Take it in bite-sized pieces.
You got to take it in bite-sized pieces. And I'm sitting at church one day, and we had International Justice Mission come and speak to us about their advocacy and all the wonderful work that they're doing. And I didn't know these types of things existed. And I'm in a season of life that I can be an advocate,
right?
Okay, because when you have 4 small children at home, really your focus is your home and your children, and we try to do what we can. However, I'm in a different season of life, and I have a wonderful job where they want me to meet people. So it doesn't matter how I meet people.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to be in the community and be doing things, then I'm going to be doing things that I'm passionate about. So I'm sitting in church. We hear about International Justice Mission, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to help these people. I'm going to do what I can.
Of course you did.
To help them, because maybe this is why I found this woman's blog. Maybe this is why I was led down this rabbit hole. And I don't research that stuff anymore. I mostly now just think about, research what's happening with IGM, the cases that we're involved with, legislation, and then advocating. So speaking to women's groups and letting people like you, like the listeners, just letting them know that this evil exists in the world and what we can do. So I heard IGM, they had a challenge. We had to fast one day, and I donated some money, and then I went online and I applied to be a congressional advocate. And because I'm on I do volunteer with some Republican women groups. I was able to set up to speak at a luncheon. It was I think 180 people came. It was one of our most popular luncheons.
I was so proud of you when you did that day, because that takes a lot of preparation.
I am terrified to speaking in front of people. Okay, I was sweating. My heart was beating 100 miles a minute. I mean, it was terrifying. It was so terrifying. But God got me through it, and I was able to advocate. And then now what I try to do is meet with legislators to raise money through appropriations for International Justice Mission. And so that's currently what I'm doing. So in the fall, I have some other speaking engagements that I try to reach out to women's groups. And do you need a speaker for your luncheon? I'd be happy to talk to you about International Justice Mission. And then I also try to bring in a local group like the Refuge and talk about what they're doing, in our backyard in Austin, because mostly IGM pretty much operates in other countries. It's international.
Okay.
So I also want to tie that into what's happening, in our backyards.
Yeah, because as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking, because listeners don't know this, but I've said, I've owned a gym and I've been in the fitness industry, but I'm kind of a jack of all trades. So I also worked at the courthouse, and I worked in court administration, and I worked in the law library, and I helped out with a lot of different stuff there. But I'll never forget a training that I had to sit through and do when I worked there about sex trafficking. And I was so glad to see that training was there. But it's also very useful, especially I used to deal a lot with custody and divorce. And in custody, I had to look out for certain things too. But I'm just sitting here thinking as you're talking, because I'm also in that season of my life, like, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to look into it. What resources do we have locally? What could I do? Even at the bare minimum, if you're in a season of your life where you have some free time and you're looking for a passion project, even at the bare minimum, remember the MOPS programs?
Yeah.
Okay. Go speak at a MOPS program. I remember I used to go to those a couple times, and like, there's the junior league. There's different women's organizations that are local that I think would love to hear some education on this.
And they're all typically looking for a speaker for one of their meetings.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
A lot of them
I'll
do.
have to start researching. And
you would be surprised. A lot of the women's luncheons, ladies groups, like they're typically pretty open to having a speaker.
And even if it is a program like MOPS where your kids are still little, you're planting a seed.
Yes.
Because then when they're in that season of their life and they have a little bit more free time, then maybe they can take over. Which you planted the seed in me years ago, and I was in no position to do anything, but I am now. So I'm glad that I've taken it in bite-sized pieces. But I just want to thank you for what you do.
Oh.
Because we all need to, in some small way, be reaching out into our community, especially as women, to help each other. Because, listen, I love men. Men are great. I never bash men on here at all. But I'm old fashioned, and I'm a firm believer that we both have roles in life just biologically from God. So I really believe now, of course, men are going to save the children. Nothing was hotter than seeing those guys on screen, right? And a man is going and saving children like that. But the women
he wasn't hard on the eyes.
Yeah. But it's the women. It's the women that are more just biologically set up to be empathetic and to be the caretakers of the community. And it's the women that really are like saying to their husbands or men, like, hey, can you help me with this and do this? And then they go carry out the physical mission of it. And one thing I will end with this, because we're talking about what the Sound of Freedom missed, and I am a little upset about this. I really think they missed giving Tim's wife credit, because if you see him on podcasts and you see his interviews, he loves his wife so much. And she's such a strong Christian. And she would literally pray about something and call him with some crazy idea. I prayed about it and you have to go to Honduras. He goes, do you realize, he goes, I get it. When you say something, I believe you and I listen to you because you're that close. You're that close to God. He goes, but do you realize your husband might not come back to you? And she cried and said, yes, but God spoke to me and we have to do this. And I will hold down the fort and raise the kids and I will continue to pray for you, but you carry out the mission. And I know there's going to be so many women crawling out of their skin hearing me talk like this. I know it sounds barbaric, but it's basic physiology. I don't care what you say. Not that women can't be on the mission and certainly be involved. Sure. But I'm just saying that she didn't get the credit in the movie that I really wish they showed her twice.
I know.
And they didn't. I wish they would have shown more of the loving relationship between them and their phone conversations and her praying.
I think too, people, I'm not religious. If it's a religious movie, I don't want to see it. So maybe they wanted to widen the demographic that would come and see the movie. And if people thought that this was a religious film,
right,
then they wouldn't go and see it. So I think they wanted to keep it open for everybody.
I agree.
And I think that was really smart because this is a bipartisan issue.
I do too.
And that's what I try to tell people is it doesn't matter what part of the aisle that you're on.
Politically or religiously. Or spiritually.
Whatever. Abusing children
is just wrong.
Abusing people is wrong.
Right.
We celebrated Juneteenth last month, but we have more people on this earth living in slavery. Right now, we have more people than the population of the state of California living in slavery. We have child trafficking, sex trafficking that makes more money than Chevron, yet we never hear about it. So
Well, I agree with you. And I always say my blessing and my curse is that I can see both sides of every situation. And I do, even though it did upset me that their relationship wasn't depicted in that movie and her faith, I do understand why they did it. And I'm actually grateful that it drew people into the theaters, like you said, that normally wouldn't have been.
Right.
If they would have thought it was a Christian movie or whatever.
Exactly. Like this was a big wake-up call. So
they were actually pretty strategically smart when they...
I think,
yeah. So
And also, Tim wouldn't have been able to do any of that if it wasn't for his strong wife.
No.
He has a strong woman.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Carmalene, let's talk a little bit to all the moms listening that have daughters that are approaching their dating years. And I know we've all heard about catfishing and, people lying about who they are online and everything, but I want you to speak to, this is even scarier to me because what you just told me, okay, and now you're going to share with the listeners, it scares me because it's not catfishing. It's not some old pervo lying about who they are. These are real boys, our daughters' ages, that want to date them, but lure them into the sex trafficking world. So please explain to all the moms listening how this happens because it's scary.
So what happened with the Sound of Freedom is they're talking about what's happening in other countries, right? And when I talk about volunteering for International Justice Mission and then the refuge. So the refuge is in Austin. That's in my state. That's in my town. And the kids that are there, the young women that are there, those are American girls. And what happens is they meet a boy. In certain cases, they'll meet a boy online. And they become friendly with him. And then more intimate, and then he becomes their boyfriend, and all it takes is a fight with mom and dad, and oh, your parents suck, can you get out tonight, I'll come pick you up. And it starts out as something like a relationship, and they think this boy cares about them, and then he is looking for an opportunity where he can get your daughter, and before you know it, she's meeting him out. He takes her phone, drives her to another state, and starts trafficking her. And she doesn't have a phone. She has no money, and she is at his whim.
And let's point out that I asked my daughters when they were younger, well, how do you meet boys anymore? They told me basically everybody pretty much meets online now. So you're on a social media app. Okay, that's how they're meeting.
Yeah,
that's how they're meeting.
On
it's
Snapchat.
Not.
They could easily say. I mean, I live in Austin. I mean, this is a small town. I mean, you all only have like two high schools. Well, 3 high schools within how many mile radius?
But this is on YouTube, so maybe somebody might find this someday that lives somewhere else.
But where we live, we live in Austin. We live in a huge state. So, for instance, my daughters could be talking online with somebody through Snapchat that might know some of her friends, but you don't really know if they actually know these people, if they've actually ever been in the same room with them and met them face to face. And they could easily say, oh, I go to a high school, but maybe it's 40 miles away.
Right.
And they start talking to this boy. They make a friendship with him. It's very easy through FaceTime and Snapchat and their cell phone to then become close to him. He becomes a boyfriend. He becomes a confidant. He might even meet her out a couple of times, take her on a date. And
let's point out that he's her age.
Yes.
So you think it's normal. Oh, my daughter met a boy and she's starting to date him and he seems like a clean cut, nice kid and whatever.
But he could also be, I mean, it's hard to tell the age of someone between 17 and even 22, 23.
True.
Right?
Right.
So he's he's young, he's a good looking kid, and now he's your daughter's boyfriend, and he's looking for an opportunity.
And he gains trust.
He gains the trust. Mm-hmm. And then she's upset. Oh, I hate my parents. Why don't you come stay with me for a while?
Well, even if she's not upset, if he gains her trust first by going on a couple of dates, she thinks the third time we're just going on a third date.
Yep.
And that's the time he takes her phone, ditches it. So if you think those little family apps are saving you because you know where your kid's at, think again. Because they're going to put that phone somewhere else, or they're going to throw it in the middle of the woods, and you're never going to know where your daughter is.
Correct. I mean, my daughter even once left her phone at a friend's house that she was supposed to be at. And then they all left.
Yeah.
And I thought she was there the whole time, and she wasn't. Her phone was there, but she wasn't.
Of course. Kids are going to be kids. Sure.
Yes.
Right.
So,
but that, when you told me that this was happening, it's so scary to me. So these boys are making money. And you think it's just a regular boy and they're dating, and it's like, so sex traffickers aren't like the big scary man anymore, or the seducing lady like that was in The Sound of Freedom. There are boys around the age of your daughters, and they're having these relationships. Mm-hmm. I mean, not only do we have to be aware of as mothers, we have to have these conversations with our daughters. And this brings me back to the whole point of, as a parent, please know that not only who your child is with, but the families of the children. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm going over to so-and-so's house. Okay. I want to meet their parents. If I don't know their parents, I want to go over and talk to them in person. I want to see the neighborhood. I want to see the house. I want to see the parents. I mean, you've got to go the extra mile today. I know we have so much on our plate and we have so much to do, and this is just one more thing. You've got to be aware. The evil, like we were saying, is more prevalent now. This has always happened, but it's so much more prevalent, and it's so much easier now because of these stupid phones.
Yeah, and people are greedy. They're going to make money.
So it could be a girl. So, these young girls, young boys luring our children, because this happens to boys too, into a dating situation, and they're making money off of handing them off to sex traffickers.
Yep. Or you have traffickers going to high school parties, to bars.
Oh, that's right. You said that.
And they look for someone that's intoxicated, that's alone.
Right. So never leave your friend alone. I've preached that. Never leave your friend alone, especially if she's been drinking. And a side note, never leave your drink unattended and go back to it. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure we addressed this part of the human trafficking, because if we look at it as, it happens to people out there, it happens to people in other countries, it happens in the U.S. We are not just the largest consumer, but our children are getting stolen here and sex trafficked here. And it's not always the big, scary, hairy monster or the beautiful woman. It's the younger people that they're employing now to do this. So please be aware. And the little GPS things in your phone, not enough. Please, let's go back to community, know who our kids are with. And I know it's just one more thing for us to worry about and be on top of as parents, which breaks my heart because I don't want to make parents feel guilty or give them one more thing to think about. But I also wouldn't feel right if I didn't educate them on this part of it.
Know who your kids are talking to online.
And know who your kids are talking to online. Thank you.
But there's something that every single one of us can do today, tomorrow, every day. And that's pray. Because I do believe in the power of prayer. And the more people that we have praying for these children, we have praying to soften the hearts of the people that work in this industry. If we can pray for the children to have hope, if we can pray for someone to give an anonymous tip, if we can pray for these people to look at these children, these people that they are abusing, as a loved one. Ask God to give them eyes for these people to look, to see them as somebody, as their mother, their daughter, their sister, their cousin, because they don't see them as human. They look at them as separate from themselves. And if they could see them as human beings, then I think that would change a lot of things. And the sickening thing is like some of these kids are trafficked by their own parents. There's cases in the U.S. where daughters are being trafficked by their parents, by their father, by their mother. And to even see a woman doing this, it's so like,
well, she obviously was damaged
for the
at
money,
some point.
Right? You got to wonder like what happened to her.
Yeah. But that was a great way to end it. You don't have to be Christian to pray. I don't care what faith you believe in. it's if we want to get sciencey, it's a quantum physics issue. It's a collective consciousness that I feel is not there, that used to be there years ago, and we have proven it with science that collectively as a world, when we're all praying or whatever you want to call it, meditating, whatever you want to call it, if you're not Christian, you can change the vibrational frequency of the earth.
Absolutely. You pray for God to reveal what's happening in the darkness.
Yeah.
To bring it to light.
Yeah.
And a great way to explain quantum physics for anybody out there is IKEA did this experiment, and they had 2 plants, and they had them under glass, and they gave them the same environment, same sunlight, same water, everything. But they had 2 signs on the plants. And one of them was, if, love this plant, give this plant compliments. Like, people were instructed to be kind and to love the one plant.
Mm-hmm.
The other plant, they wanted people to hurl insults at and hate on the plant,
Yes.
right?
Anger. Yeah.
Anger. And guess what?
I know, but
The
go ahead.
one plant that received the love and the admiration lived, and it prospered, and it was beautiful. The other one started to die. So that tells you
Same
right there.
exact external environment.
Exactly. So we all perpetuate an energy, right? And if we could send this energy, imagine how powerful that could be if we had millions of people praying about this.
And let's stop fighting over, well, you believe in Jesus and I don't, or you believe in Buddha and I don't, or you believe... Okay, semantics, stop. That's why I always bring up quantum physics. That's kind of been my little rabbit hole for the past, like, this is yours, like human trafficking is yours, which explains a lot as to why we're friends. And I'm like, stop. You're playing semantics, okay? And God is not like Santa Claus, not some bearded man in the sky. Okay, you guys, you need to understand this. You do it in a way that works for you, but I guarantee that energy is going to be received by the world. It's going to be received, and we need to start as a collective doing it again. Step 2, beyond praying, is look up International Justice Mission, IJM. I'll have the link under the video. 3rd is look locally if there's anything you can do. If not, grassroots it if you're in that season of your life. And I know my daughter and I and your daughters and you loved the movie, The Sound of Freedom. And yeah, we feel as though they missed some stuff, but we also understand you got to meet people where they're at.
Exactly.
And I think the majority of the population is the writers and the editors and the producers. They nailed it. They nailed meeting people where they were at. I will go to my grave not understanding that level of evil.
No, because children are so innocent. They're so innocent, and God so loved the children, right? And that is the biggest affront to God, is to be abusing children like that.
So we're going to end it with the actor, Jim, what he said at the end of the movie. What did he say? He said, God's children are not for sale.